How sweet are thy words unto my taste, yea, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through thy precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
Because all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers, and the flower falls away, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Now this is the word which by the gospel was preached to you. Welcome to the Biblical Christianity Podcast. We are certainly glad to be back in the studio. We've been absent for a couple of weeks, and we are happy to bring you once again content from the Scriptures. We've been out of the country. Terrence and Tom have been out of the country. We've been working locally, but we are happy to be back with you today. And today we're going to be discussing the subject of membership. Now, the subject of membership has not enjoyed a lot of attention over the years. The reason for this was the implicit nature of the matter. Generally speaking, most folks understood the concept of membership from a biblical perspective, and most grasped how membership in the local body was established. But sadly, this clarity has become shrouded in ambiguity. The murkiness of the subject can undoubtedly be attributed to an array of improprieties, one of them being the presupposition that it was widely understood. And this assumption may have led to a lack of teaching on the subject. So hence today we have individuals floating from one congregation to another and thinking that it is okay. And in this podcast, we want to see what the Bible says about the subject, what the Bible says about placing membership in the local congregation. And so just also as a disclaimer or as something that needs to be said, we're not talking about becoming a member of the church for which Jesus died by obedience to the gospel. We're talking about membership in the local body. We're talking about individual Christians placing membership in the local body. Gentlemen, being back in the studio, we're glad to be back. This subject, what have you taught on, or what have you heard in the years as you've been preaching and serving as elders and preachers in various places? How has this subject come to the fore?
Well, I think about the two different maybe types of people that are involved here. There's one set of people who don't want to be a member of a local congregation because they don't want to be checked up on. And then on the other hand, you have those who just have no idea. They're ignorant of the need to be a part of a local congregation. And either one of those need to be taught the same thing, the importance of being a part of the local body. And as we get into our study of this time, we're going to see the importance of being a part of a local congregation for your spiritual stability and also for the helping of other people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Something that Mornay said in the opening statements, and you just hit on as well, Brother Tom, is the fact that some people just don't understand how this thing works. We cannot take for granted that whenever someone obeys the gospel that they understand all the ins and outs, if you will, of church membership and how these things work. And again, we just have to be very, very careful to help people to make sure they understand. Like you said, there's some things that pertain to the spiritual growth that God has designed into the local and autonomous congregation that are for our benefit. We talk about the fact in places like the book of Hebrews chapter 13, verse number 17, that those of us who are shepherds are responsible for the souls, overseeing the souls of that flock. And so therefore, it's incumbent upon the flock to make sure that they're stationary to an extent. We're not saying you can't go visit other places and things like that, but stationary, a part of a membership of a local congregation so that the elders can do the job that God has given them to do.
Yeah, and so certainly when we consider the subject of membership, it is not the case that the Bible has nothing to say about it. We understand how the Bible authorizes, and this is authorized within the Scripture, and I think we're going to, this is going to be borne out in our discussion. And so in our discussion, we're going to take a look at a couple of aspects relating to membership. One of the aspects we want to start with is the autonomy of the local congregation. We understand that there is but one church. There is one church. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 4 tells us that there is one body. We understand the body is the church. But there are many congregations. There are many congregations. And if we take this a little step further, when the Apostle Paul was writing to Titus and he was writing to Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, and also Titus chapter 1 and verse 5, Titus was told and Timothy was told to ordain elders in every church or every congregation. And so therein, in a region with well over 100 cities, there was a need for there to be elders in every congregation. And therein do we see the need for congregations to operate independently when we consider what elders do and how they operate.
Yeah. Yeah, and because elders are over a local congregation, it's not a universal oversight, but it's a local oversight. And being a part of that local congregation, then the elders have the responsibility and the privilege and see the importance of looking after each individual. You know, we have talked with people at BCS about a lot of time when our college kids come into town, we talk about the need for them to place membership so that we can know they want to be a part and know that we need to be looking out for them and know that we're there for them. But if we don't know that they want to be a part of us, then we don't know to look after them or care for them.
That's right, and to highlight the fact that sometimes it's just a matter that people just don't know. To continue in what Brother Tom was talking about there, we had asked our preacher, Brother John Hall, if he would preach a sermon on local membership and the role of elders and the responsibility of the flock to the elders and things like that pertain to this subject matter. And he did that, and we want to do that for this sake. In Bryan College Station, there are a multiplicity of congregations. Now, some are sounder than others, but there are a multiplicity of congregations, and there are a couple of sound congregations here, and sometimes the college students, they would kind of jump back and forth. Because again, it's just nature. These people are in transit, if you will, faithful Christians, but they're in transit, and sometimes some of them would go to one congregation. They would meet each other at different events, and hey, we're going to come over there and be with you maybe for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'll come over here to BCS for 3 or 4 weeks. And they were doing that without any ill will or any ill intention. Just didn't understand that they need to be have membership in one congregation or the other. And so we preached that, and here's what's indicative of the fact that so many of them just didn't understand. Whenever we preached that sermon, then we had a flood of young people coming into our office as the elders saying, hey, we want to place membership. So they just simply did not know.
Yeah, there's, when you look at congregations, and when they said the Apostle Paul said to ordain elders in every church, when you look at the eldership overseeing the church, we understand that there's no mention in Scripture of a universal or a regional rule of elders. And so when we look at the qualification and the function of elders, they rule over the local body. And so because they rule over the local body, just like the church is not universally overseen, membership is not universal in that sense. You cannot go from one to the other and not place membership. It is futile to assert the elder's rule is limited to the local body, but yet the membership transcends the local body. They would not be able to carry out their function as elders, and the congregation would not be able to operate autonomously if members were intermingled with other congregations.
Yeah, and I think when you're church hopping or whatever they call it these days, that you're missing out on a very vital aspect of being a member of a local congregation. I think in terms of being a shepherd in a local congregation, how that elders are a ruler and a guide and a protector and a companion to these people. And if they don't stay in one place and don't place their membership, then they're losing out of spiritual guidance. They're losing out on the protection that they can have. And when they're missing, we say, "You okay? Right. Do you need something? Are you hurting?" But if we don't know they're a part of us, then they really miss out on that companionship that they have as a part of a local body.
Speaking of that, yeah, it extends beyond just what the elders bring to the table where this is concerned. Again, our job is to watch over their souls, to lead them, to protect them, to feed them, all the things that we see set forth by way of the responsibilities of shepherds in the scriptures. But again, just the camaraderie that they miss out on within the parameters of that local congregation when they are always, as you mentioned, Brother Tom, church hopping. You're just not able to have that. And I think about beautiful relationships that we've been able to establish over the years with people that we've been able to work side by side with in a single congregation for a multiplicity of years. Those are beautiful relationships that we'll never lose sight of. Now, obviously, things happen in life to sometimes predicate the idea of having to move around or whatever the case may be. But whenever people have been able to stay in a congregation any length of time, that camaraderie is certainly a beautiful aspect of the Christian system. I think about Paul in Acts 20, and he was able to stay in the Ephesian congregation for almost 3 years, about the space of 3 years. And you go to Acts chapter 20, you look at the relationship that was forged between he and those elders there. Man, that is something that is absolutely to be cherished and adored.
Yeah, before we move on from this concept of the autonomy of the local body, and how does the non-membership, the floating membership, how does this affect the decision-making of the local body? I think all of us have experienced the concept where in a local congregation there may not be elders, right? There may not be elders, and so the men there will try to do the work of the Lord, will seek to implement certain things. And I've heard of one situation where individuals were trying to make a decision. There would be men coming from outside and trying to make decisions within that local congregation. Well, if a floating membership was allowed scripturally, then there would be nothing wrong with it. In fact, if we want to accomplish something, all I would say is, well, Tom and Terrence, why don't you guys come over to Longmire so that I can have more votes, quote unquote, in relation to what we want to accomplish. And a floating membership would promote that type of disunity and that type of function within the body.
Yeah, and that way, and you could have a rebel rouser just going from one congregation to another congregation and causing great difficulty.
That's right.
But I think also in making decisions in a congregation, if you have several floating members, and when they're there, your contribution is like $1,000 more than it is when they're not there. How does an eldership make the decisions on finance when they can't verify the money coming in? I think the financial aspect, though it may not be the most important thing, does play a big part, I think, in that membership.
Yeah, man, it's almost like God knew exactly what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
So whenever God sets a plan in order, whenever he orchestrates the logistics of the way that a thing should be, then that is obviously the best way that it's to be done. Some of the things that you're talking about, we saw some of those things in action, and I don't mean to be insultive to anyone. That is not my intention whatsoever, but we lived in Florida and labored in Florida for 7 years, and of course this is kind of one of the vacation capitals of the world. We would have what we would call snowbirds, all right, and they called themselves that, so I don't think it was a derogatory term, but they call themselves snowbirds. They would be from somewhere up in the Northeast or somewhere in the Midwest up north, and they would come down to Florida for the winter months, and stay 3, 4, 5 months there, and then in the summertime they're gone. And I talked to some preachers that were in congregations where the snowbirds, to use their terms again, were very prevalent. And man, they would talk about the difficulties of being able to really plan or do anything when you know that about half your congregation is not going to be there for about half of the year. We didn't necessarily deal with that in our congregation, but lots of the congregations did. And so that's just an example where you see the practical difficulties that come along with people who are not stationary in their membership.
Yeah, so the autonomy of the local body is affected by the concept of a floating membership. We can't function autonomously if we have a floating membership. But then also, I want to take a look at pastoral oversight, the elderships. I want to look a little bit in detail. I want to go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, because I think Peter really makes it clear. And Terrence, you can speak to this, being our local Greek aficionado, he would know how to deal with this appropriately. The elders, Peter says, the elders who are among you, I exhort, I, who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed, shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly. And so the phrase which is among you in the Greek there is defined or described in the following way. And Terrence, can you speak to this? A primary preposition denoting a fixed position in place, time, or in state.
Yeah, for sure. So you look at that preposition "in," and most often it's a dative preposition. Always takes a dative case, and most often it is translated "in," in our English, but in certain contexts it will be translated "among." And again, yeah, it certainly refers to kind of a fixed state, if you will. There are some prepositions, epi, for instance, sometimes ace, that they denote kind of a transient action, epi, the action of moving on to or on top of something. But this is, again, connotes the idea of a fixed position.
Got you. And so when you consider this fixed position, elders shepherd the flock that is among them. Right, and I think it becomes evident to us, according to the language scholars at least, that the Christians who remain among them, and so the indirect application of the text necessitates a membership, necessitates that they oversee those who remain among them. The elders are not to oversee members of another congregation. Right. They can't do that, and so if we have a floating membership, the rule of the eldership is now brought into disrepute.
Mm-hmm. You know, you think about the eldership and looking out over the flock, you're not just missing out on this individual that's floating around, but it also affects their overseeing of the whole flock. For example, various works that you're involved in and things that local congregations do. Can I count on this person? Well, I really can't, because I don't know if he's going to be here or not. And so that affects the whole church in that regard. And so when elders start planning events for the church and various efforts that they're involved in, if we don't have an established membership, that really affects how we're going to lead the flock.
Yeah, so we're dealing with the idea of pastoral oversight. And again, just the very plain pattern that we see in the New Testament scriptures are that pastors, shepherds, elders, whatever we choose to call them, the Bible calls them all three, they have the oversight over a single congregation. As far as I can see in history, the first time that we began to have the idea of a pastor system where you have a head pastor and this man eventually being able to assume the oversight of a multiplicity of congregations seems to be from the writings of Ignatius of Antioch. Of course, when you look at books like Maddox's Eternal Kingdom, and you look at some others, early Christians speak, and there are some extant records of some of the things that were being said and being written. It seems that Ignatius may have been one of the first instigators of this idea of having an elder that is a chief elder, a head elder. His human reasoning, from what I could understand, was or revolved around the idea that if we have one man being able to call the shots in regards to doctrinal purity, then the church would be more prone to be doctrinally pure. Well, we see how that worked out when you look at Roman Catholicism, which becomes one of the consequences of that type of thinking and many other doctrinal deviancies. But at any rate, before all is said and done, this thing morphs or evolves into this idea of one man being a pastor or a overseer of a multiplicity of congregations. And again, that is just a situation that is contrary to anything that we see in the scriptures.
Yeah, when you think about the operation of the local congregation and what the congregation does and the eldership that oversees that work, when you have a floating membership, as I think we've talked about this point and we've mentioned it from the very beginning, the church has a mandate. It has a mandate to operate and to the cause of Christ and to fulfill the cause of Christ, which is evangelism, benevolence, and edification. And so the elders are going to see that this mandate is fulfilled, that it has to be done. and they have the authority to put certain things in place, right? They have the authority to decide what is going to be done in the congregation and what they decide not to do. And so if they have put all of these works in place, or as Tom said earlier, if they want to do anything, there is absolutely no certainty. They cannot lead. It is impossible for them to lead over these group of people and to speak authoritatively and say, we are going to do this, or this is, because all someone has to do is, well, you know what, I'm just going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
It really causes the concept of a floating membership causes the eldership to lose essentially their authority.
You're exactly right. And I think also it puts a great hardship on the members at large, because now they're having to do more work, or they may be counting on you to do something, but then you're floating over this other congregation and you're working over there instead. And so God's way is always the best way, right?
Sure.
And so working together as a group, can you imagine the parable about a man working over in another man's vineyard? And I know that that's talking about maybe out of the church and in the church, but we have two congregations here, and you're working in one congregation, and you are not working in this one, and the next time you're working in that one and you're not working in this one, the work's not getting done. And there's difficulty, and it's causing hardship for the members. It's causing hardship for the eldership who are trying to get things going. It's just, if you're going to work in the vineyard, pick one and work in it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it obviously is a matter of eternality. When you look at verse number 17, which we alluded to just a moment ago of Hebrews chapter 13, the Bible says, obey them that have the rule over you, literally the leading ones. Is a participle in the Greek here. It's the leading ones. It's kind of the idea. Submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they must give an account. As they that must give an account, that is, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. And so at the end of the day, those of us who are shepherds of the flock, the Bible tells you very plainly that we will give an account for the souls that are under our oversight.
Yeah, I wonder if we ever asked somebody, who's watching out for your soul?
Yeah.
Who's going to be giving account to you? Is it going to be that congregation or this congregation?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to have to be giving an account here, and it's not fair to me to give an account of somebody who's only here half the time.
Yeah, you came in on Sunday, was gone for 3 weeks, came again, and when you ask about you member, oh yeah, I'm a member here. Well, I'm kind of everywhere, right? And so it truly is. It not only nullifies the authority of the eldership as far as leading and being responsible, as Terrence mentioned, for and being accountable rather for the souls of people, but also it hampers their work. I want to move on here and talk about
Can
two
I
more.
say one thing before we go
ahead.
from there? When I was thinking about this thing just a second ago, I was thinking about pro basketball. You know, these basketball players switch teams every other year, and they don't really have any kind of allegiance to their team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think a person who's jumping from one congregation to another congregation has no allegiance to the local congregation. And so they're just kind of jumping everywhere, wherever they think they're going to get the championship, right?
Yeah.
Or wherever they think they can go and not be harassed or asked to do something, that's where they go.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, a couple of things we also want to address. Obviously, the responsibility of the individual Christian. The church comprised of individuals. We understand it's not a building. We operate together and separately in the cause of Christ. And so God created this kingdom where every citizen has a part to play. And Paul illustrates that in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and he speaks to the local congregation there in relation to the spiritual gifts that they receive, the miraculous spiritual gifts that they receive. We understand we do not have those miraculous gifts anymore, but yet the principle still remains. We must still operate locally as a unit in order to accomplish the work. And you simply cannot do that. A floating membership or a non-committed individual hinders the effectiveness of carrying out the local work. Because as you guys have mentioned, and I think we belabored this, how could we possibly plan anything for the Lord when people are non-committal to the work that is happening in that congregation?
I think about maybe even just participating in the worship service. Let's just say you have a guy who's a great song leader, but he's there only half the time or even only a fourth of the time. And the other guys, they do an okay job, but they're not this guy, So he's hindering the worship, and I think that causes also difficulty in our congregation as well.
Yeah, no doubt. So we could see this thing is fraught with difficulties whenever people will not respect the biblical pattern for how individual church membership and autonomous congregations are the work. And so we've spoken to the fact that sometimes this is simply a problem of ignorance, and it can be corrected with some teaching and some understanding being gained. But on the other side of that coin, sometimes I've met people that do this deliberately. Yep. I met a couple in Florida a number of years ago that the wife of this couple told me that we don't stay in any one congregation. I mean, they had membership and a multiplicity of congregations there in Allen Parish. And that certainly prompted me to preach on that, because they had wanted to place membership with us. And it was after they'd already placed membership with us that me and one of the elders were sitting down and talked to them, and this was revealed to us. And so I was motivated to preach on that subject, just like we're kind of talking about it right now today, and I did. And you're just thinking that, well, okay, maybe now they've got some understanding, but since we've left Florida and gone back, they've since moved to another congregation. Yeah. And so I understand then it's not a matter of ignorance, sincere ignorance or innocent ignorance. It's a matter of, no, we're going to do what we want to do here. And so that becomes a problem as
Absolutely. Well. And I think we can move on to that. This is one of the things I also want to discuss. We understand it affects the autonomy of the local congregation. It affects the oversight of the elders. It affects the local work that is done by the Christian in the individual congregation, but also the negative impacts here are more far-reaching when you consider individuals who church hop, if you will, to get away from responsibility, to get away from rebuke, because there are individuals who they don't like it over here, and so they were rebuked over here, and so they're just hopping to one congregation to another. And elders who allow that to happen really hinder the church in that respect.
Yeah, man. When you begin to talk about that, man, it really resonated with me. We as elders have a responsibility to curtail that type of thing. Really do. So again, those elderships that just simply allow people to continue flooding into their congregations from other places, no questions asked, then ultimately we become a part of the problem rather than the solution.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of issues that can occur as a result of that. For example, if they don't place membership and you bring them in and talk with them and find out where they are, you don't know what they're bringing into the local congregation doctrinally. Mm-hmm. So there could be a big problem there. And on the other hand, there are those who don't want that for that very reason, and so they're going to go from place to place and say, where were you? Well, I'm not a member there. You don't have a right to talk to me, type of scenario. And either they don't want to be scolded or encouraged in that regard, or they're just being like a wolf in sheep's clothing, and they're going from place to place. I don't want to judge a man's heart, but I think we probably have seen people who have done that over the years go from place to place trying to propagate their false doctrine, but say, hey, I'm not a member there, you can't get on to me.
Yes, very, very quickly, and I just thought about this, and how important is this concept of placing membership. I think it becomes very important for us in a what we call a post-COVID society, where people are promoting the concept of digital worship, where people are worshiping online. And I've always made the case is, so what you're saying is that individuals, as long as they're online, they're members of your congregation, they never have to set foot in the door, because you can worship just about anywhere. So essentially, membership in the local body then transcends just being physically there. You can be in Africa, you can be in Australia and be a local member at the BCS congregation as long as you're online.
I guess I could be a member of the San Antonio Spurs because I watch them on TV.
Yeah, right. And so the idea, I think the argument, and what I want us to just think about is that if there is no need for membership, if there is no fixed membership that must take place within the local body, then yes, then you know what? I can be anywhere and be a member of anything.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to speak, as we draw close to a close here, to that mindset, these are things that we've heard, and these are things that we've witnessed during the whole COVID thing and then the idea of virtual or digital worship, I'm telling you, I had members tell me this. Not of our congregation, because we never close the doors, subscribe to digital worship, but I had other members tell me that, yeah, I got up this morning and started watching such and such as worship services, and I didn't really care for what he was talking about that morning, so I just switched, pushed a button on my computer, switched to another service, and didn't really like that one. So we got people that are jumping to between 2 or 3 services on Sunday morning during this COVID period, and that, again, that's the mindset that manifests itself in this idea of a floating membership where in-person worship is concerned.
Absolutely. That's all we have time for today. When you read the New Testament, it is evident that people were associated with various congregations. Someone from the household of Chloe was associated with a congregation in Corinth, 1 Corinthians 1 verse 11. Barnabas was associated with the church in Antioch. Phoebe was called a servant of the church in Cenchrea. And there are clear indications in Scripture that individuals were committed to one particular congregation. And I think we've seen, as we look at the Scriptures, that we have to place membership in a certain congregation. We have to submit ourselves to an eldership locally if that is where we live or if that is where we are going. The concept of a floating membership or a non-committed member in the local body is foreign to New Testament writ, and it's something certainly that we cannot approve of. We're thankful that you joined us. As always, if you have any questions, our email address is on the bottom of the screen. We would love to hear from you. We always appreciate your responses. And until next time, thank you.